Daniel had always lived a quiet and simple life. The kind of life where every day felt familiar and peaceful. He was a calm man with a gentle face, someone who looked like he never hurried, never raised his voice, and never caused trouble for anyone. People in his small rural town often said he was the type of person who made others feel safe without even trying. He worked as a mechanic, fixing everything from tractors to children's bicycles, and he never refused to help anyone who asked for assistance. Even those who did not know him very well always said he had a warm smile, soft eyes, and a patient way of listening that made people trust him. The town he lived in was small and friendly, the kind where everyone knew each other's names and stories. The streets were quiet, the houses were close together, and the smell of fresh bread or someone's cooking often filled the air. Daniel had lived there all his life, except for a short time when he moved to a nearby city many years ago. It was during that time in the city, when he was very young and struggling, that something happened which he had almost forgotten. It was a decision he made out of desperation, something he never thought would matter in the future. But for now, in his present life, it stayed buried deep in his memory, coming up only as a passing thought once in a long while. Back then, Daniel had been 20 years old, living in a small rented room, trying to pay for meals and rent with whatever work he could find. One month, when money ran out and work was slow, he saw a small paper advertisement on the wall of a local shop. It mentioned that a medical clinic needed healthy young men for donations. The payment was small, but enough for him at the time. He did not think much about it. He only needed money for a few days to help him get through the month. So he went to the clinic, signed some papers, followed their instructions, and left with a few bills in his pocket. It was supposed to be a simple, one-time thing. The clinic told him it would help families who could not have children. He felt a little good inside about that, but he never imagined it would matter in any bigger way. Once he moved back to his hometown, he forgot about it, just like people forget small things they do in youth. Years passed, and Daniel rebuilt his life slowly. He worked at a local workshop and became known as one of the most reliable mechanics around. He was the kind of person who woke up early, made a simple breakfast, and walked to work with calm steps. He enjoyed repairing things, especially things that children brought him. For some reason, kids in town felt comfortable with him. They would come with their little broken toys, loose wheels, or squeaking bicycles, and Daniel always welcomed them with patience. He would kneel down, ask gentle questions, and explain how he could fix the problem. Then, while working, he listened to their stories about school or friends. When he handed the toys back, they sometimes hugged him or shouted his name with excitement before running off. He never knew why children liked him so much, but it warmed his heart. Some people teased him about it. "Kids follow you like little ducks," the baker once joked. "You should charge a fee for every child who comes to your shop." Daniel only laughed softly. He didn't mind. He felt happy when he could help. He had always imagined he might become a father someday, but life had never gone in that direction. He had never found the right partner, never built a family, never held his own child in his arms. So, in a strange way, the children in town filled that empty space without him fully realizing it. But over time, there were small things he noticed, things that seemed curious yet harmless. Some of the kids had his same dimples when they smiled. Some had his same brown curls that fell over the forehead. A few had that same soft, thoughtful look in their eyes. Parents sometimes joked, "Our kids look a bit like you, Daniel." But they always laughed afterward, so no one took it seriously. Daniel smiled politely, thinking it was just a funny coincidence. After all, in a small town, people often shared features. That was natural. He never once imagined anything unusual. Life kept moving quietly. Every morning he swept the workshop floor, organized his tools, and started whatever repairs were waiting. Some days, he repaired a farmer's truck. Other days he helped a young mother whose washing machine had stopped working. Once a week he volunteered at the community center, helping children learn how to repair bicycles or build small wooden projects. He enjoyed those moments the most, because the kids' faces filled with pride when they completed something with their own hands. Daniel lived alone in a small but cozy house at the edge of town. The house had old wooden walls, a warm kitchen, and a small garden in the back where he grew herbs and vegetables. He liked quiet evenings where he cooked simple meals and sat outside watching the sunset. He sometimes wondered what his life would look like in the future. Would he ever meet someone? Would he stay alone forever? But these thoughts came and went like soft winds. He was not unhappy. He believed that life would unfold at its own pace. Everything felt steady and predictable until the day a team of college researchers arrived in town. They came for a community ancestry project. Something harmless and fun that people participated in out of curiosity. The researchers asked families if they wanted to take part in a DNA survey to learn about regional history, migration patterns, and old family roots. It was voluntary, and many families joined for entertainment. People liked the idea of discovering if they had ancestors from faraway places. Daniel had no interest at first. He believed his family history was simple. His parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents had always lived in the region. He didn't think there would be anything surprising. But the townspeople were excited, and many of his friends insisted that he join. They said it was free, and maybe he would learn something interesting about his background. Finally, after several people encouraged him, Daniel agreed. He walked to the community hall where the researchers had set up their tables, answered a few questions, and provided a sample. The entire process was quick, and he did not think about it again. For him, it was nothing more than a fun little town activity. Weeks passed, and life continued normally. But one late afternoon, while repairing an old motorcycle in his workshop, he checked his email and saw a new message from the research team. Unlike the earlier friendly messages, this one asked him to contact them as soon as possible. Daniel felt confused but not worried. He thought maybe they lost his paperwork or needed him to sign something again. The next morning he walked to the temporary research office, expecting a short and simple conversation. But when he entered, he noticed the atmosphere felt more serious than before. The researchers who had been cheerful during the town presentation now looked concerned. They asked him to sit down, and one of them spoke with a careful, slow voice. They told him that his DNA results showed something unusual, something they had never seen in a small town before. At first, Daniel thought they meant he had some rare ancestry or special genetic markers. But then the researcher explained gently that his DNA matched with many children in the town. Not just 2 or 3, but a surprisingly large number. Daniel blinked, confused. He thought maybe they meant distant relatives. But the researcher shook his head softly and said the matches suggested he was the biological father of those children. At that moment, Daniel's heart froze. His hands trembled. He felt the room spinning slightly. He could barely speak. Memories rushed back the small clinic in the city. The day he donated because he was broke. The papers he signed without reading carefully. The money he accepted. He realized the truth he had avoided for years. That donation was not a small forgotten event. It was the reason for all the DNA matches. He sat there in shock, trying to understand how something so small from his past could change everything in his present. But he had no idea that this was only the beginning of a story that would reshape his entire life. Daniel walked out of the research office with slow, shaky steps, as if the ground beneath him had suddenly turned soft. The sky above him looked the same as any normal day, calm and blue, but nothing felt normal to him anymore. His mind kept repeating the same words the researcher had said. Your DNA matches with many children in the town. At first, he tried to tell himself it had to be a mistake. Maybe they mixed his sample with someone else's. Maybe the machines were broken. Maybe the team misunderstood the numbers. He told himself anything that would keep him from believing the truth. But the deeper he thought, the harder it became to deny what he already knew inside. He remembered the clinic from his youth, the way he rushed through everything, the way he signed papers without reading. He remembered the doctor saying something like, "Your donation will help families who cannot have children." Back then, he thought it was for maybe 1 or 2 families at most. He had never imagined a clinic could use someone's donations so many times. He had never imagined they would break rules. And he had definitely never imagined he would one day walk through his hometown and see children who might share his features. Daniel reached his workshop and sat on a wooden stool. He placed both hands on his knees and tried to breathe slowly. The room felt too quiet. His tools looked blurry because his eyes were filled with confusion. He kept asking himself the same question again and again. What do I do now? He knew he could not ignore the truth. He also knew he could not simply walk to every house in town and say, "I might be connected to your child." That would create fear, anger, and chaos. He felt stuck between 2 worlds, one where he wanted to run away from the truth, and another where he felt he needed to face it. Later in the afternoon, his phone rang again. It was the research team. They asked him politely if he could return for a follow-up meeting. Daniel hesitated but agreed, knowing hiding from the situation would not solve anything. When he arrived, the researchers welcomed him with calm faces. They explained that they had checked the results again and again. There was no mistake. The DNA connections were real. They also told him something even more shocking. The number of matches was extremely high, far more than any normal donation should have allowed. This meant the clinic from his youth had acted carelessly, using his donation many times, possibly more than legally permitted. The team suspected the clinic had cut corners, ignored limits, or even mishandled records. Daniel's heart sank. He felt a sense of guilt, even though he knew he was not at fault. He was just a young man who needed money at the time. He had no way of knowing the donation would be used so broadly. But guilt does not always listen to logic. He felt responsible anyway, not because he had done something wrong, but because something connected to him had grown beyond his control. One of the researchers saw the stress on his face and spoke gently. She told him, "You didn't do anything wrong. You were honest. You signed the papers they gave you. The fault is with the clinic, not you." Daniel nodded, but he still felt uneasy. He asked what would happen next. The team explained that the families who participated in the DNA study would receive their results soon. Many of them would see the matches. Some parents might have questions. Some might contact the research team directly. And some might want to speak with him. The idea frightened Daniel. He imagined parents knocking on his door, confused and emotional. He imagined children asking him questions he did not know how to answer. He imagined people blaming him. He imagined being judged. But he also imagined something else. Families who might be grateful, families who might want to understand, families who might see him not as a problem but as someone who unknowingly helped them. As he walked home that evening, Daniel passed by the park. Many children were playing, running around, laughing, and shouting. Some waved at him happily when they saw him. A few ran toward him with their usual excitement. One little girl with bright eyes held up her scooter and said, "Daniel, the wheel is loose again." Daniel knelt down without thinking, his hands working automatically as he tightened the screws. While he worked, he looked at her face. She had a smile similar to his. Her nose shape looked like his, too. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, mixed with fear and confusion. He wondered silently, is she one of them? 2000. Later that night, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea he forgot to drink. His thoughts kept circling. He wondered how many children were involved. The researchers said, many, but he did not know the exact number. Was it 5? 10? 15? All he knew was that it was more than anyone could imagine. He felt small in front of the truth, like a man standing in front of a storm he did not see coming. The next few days were heavy. Daniel went to work like normal, but his mind was never fully in the workshop. He repaired machines, fixed brakes, and answered people's questions. But inside he felt a weight pressing down on him. Every time a child smiled at him, he felt his heart shake. Every time a parent thanked him for helping, he felt nervous. He wondered if they already knew, or if they would find out soon. Then the news spread. It began quietly. A mother received her DNA results and noticed something strange. A father checked his child's profile and became confused. Another family called the research team, asking questions. And slowly, one by one, people began connecting the dots. In a town that small, it did not take long for people to talk. Whispers started in the bakery, in the grocery store, in the community center. People kept their voices low, but the words spread quickly. There's something unusual about the DNA results. Many children have the same biological match. It seems connected to someone in town. And F. Daniel could feel the change before anyone even spoke to him. People looked at him longer than usual. Some smiled, but the smile looked a little unsure. Some seemed confused when they saw him. And some looked like they wanted to ask something but were afraid. Finally, one evening, a couple approached him as he was closing his workshop. They looked nervous but polite. The mother spoke first, in a soft voice. She explained that they had submitted the DNA test for fun, and the results had shown a biological match connecting their son to Daniel. She said she did not understand how that could be. The father stood beside her, his arms crossed, not angry but tense. Daniel swallowed hard and invited them inside. He explained everything honestly, how he donated years ago, how the clinic had misused the donation, how he had no idea this would happen. He apologized even though he had no control over it. The parents listened quietly. They were shocked, but they did not blame him. They said their son was loved and cared for, and nothing would change that. They only wanted clarity. When they left, the mother touched Daniel's arm and said, "Thank you for being honest." Over the next few days, more families reached out, some through messages, some in person. Each conversation was emotional but calm. Some mothers cried a little from confusion. Some fathers worried about how this would affect their families. But almost all of them understood that Daniel was not responsible for what the clinic had done. Still, Daniel carried a quiet weight. He felt deeply connected to something bigger than himself, something he never planned and never expected. He could not change the past, but he knew he had to face whatever came next with honesty and respect. Little did he know that the entire town would soon gather for a meeting, and that gathering would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. When the families in town began receiving their DNA reports, the quiet balance of everyday life shifted without warning. What began as small whispers turned into wide conversations. And soon, it felt like the entire town was living inside one big, confusing question. Many results showed the same match. Many families realized their children had a biological connection to the same man. And that man was someone they all knew, someone they waved at on the street, someone who fixed their machines, someone their children adored. That man was Daniel. At first, people talked in private. They sat in living rooms, in parked cars, or in small groups outside the grocery store, repeating the same question. How is this possible? Some spoke carefully, as if the truth might break if handled too roughly. Others sounded nervous, unsure how to feel. But surprisingly, very few were angry. Instead, the town was filled with confusion, shock, and curiosity. Everyone was trying to understand how something so unexpected could be true. They felt like they were living inside a story they never imagined being part of. Daniel felt all of it even before anyone said a word to him directly. When he walked through town, he noticed how people looked at him in a new way. Their expressions were not unkind, just uncertain. Some looked at him with sympathy. Some looked with surprise. Some looked as if they wanted to ask 100 questions, but didn't know how to begin. He kept working in his workshop, trying to stay calm. But every knock on the door made him feel like his heart was jumping. He knew conversations were coming. He accepted that people had a right to know. After all, they were just as shocked as he was, maybe even more. He had lived with the truth for a few days. They were all trying to understand it for the first time. One afternoon, a family came in, 2 parents, and a little boy holding a small wooden airplane. The child ran to Daniel happily, not knowing anything about the new reality. Daniel smiled gently and patted his head. Then he looked at the parents. They exchanged a quiet look before the father spoke. "We got the results," the father said in a calm but controlled voice. "We were surprised. Very surprised. But we want to talk." Daniel nodded and invited them inside the workshop. He felt nervous, but he also felt a responsibility to be honest. They all sat down on chairs near the tool bench. The parents explained that their son's DNA matched Daniel's. They had read the report 3 times, thinking it was a mistake. But after talking to other families and seeing similar results, they realized it was real. Daniel shared everything: his past, the clinic, the paperwork he had signed, without understanding how much his donation would be used. He told them he felt responsible even though he had no control over what happened. He apologized for the shock and confusion. The mother said softly, "You didn't do this knowingly. We can see that." When they left, they shook his hand, thanked him for being open, and told him they respected his honesty. Encounters like that continued for days. Some families spoke calmly and openly. Some were more emotional. One mother cried because she felt overwhelmed by the truth. A father felt insecure for a moment before Daniel explained clearly that he had no intention of interfering in anyone's family. Daniel made it clear that every child already had their family, their parents, their home. He said the last thing he wanted was to change any child's life. He wanted to respect every family's peace. Those words helped people relax. They understood that Daniel was not trying to take something from them. He was just as shocked as they were. Slowly, conversations became less tense and more human. People started seeing Daniel not as a problem, but as a man who had been thrown into an unexpected situation. Finally, the town council decided to organize a gathering at the community center. They wanted everyone to sit together, hear the same information at the same time, and talk without fear or confusion. They invited Daniel too. And though he felt nervous, he agreed. He felt it was better to speak once in front of everyone, rather than face uncertain tension that could grow over time. On the evening of the gathering, the community center filled quickly. Parents sat in groups, whispering quietly. Some children played in the corner, unaware of the serious talk that was about to happen. Daniel entered slowly, and many heads turned. But instead of anger, most faces showed curiosity and sympathy. People made space for him, and he sat near the front with his hands clasped tightly. The town council began the meeting by explaining the DNA project, the unexpected results, and the scientific findings. They clarified that Daniel had made a legal donation many years ago, and that the misuse happened because of the clinic, not because of him. They emphasized he had no knowledge of how many times his donation was used. The council spoke firmly, wanting everyone to understand that Daniel had acted honestly and innocently. Then they invited Daniel to speak. He stood up slowly. He felt the eyes of the whole town on him, yet in that moment he felt strangely calm. He took a deep breath and began to speak in his simple, honest way. He told them about his youth, his struggle with money, and his decision to donate without understanding the consequences. He explained that he never imagined it would affect so many families. He said he respected every parent in the room and had no wish to disrupt their lives. He apologized for the shock, even though he knew he was not to blame. As he spoke, the room grew quiet. People saw not a man who caused chaos, but a man standing bravely in the middle of a storm he never asked for, A man who did not hide, did not lie, and did not run away. A man who felt just as overwhelmed as they did, yet was still trying to do the right thing. When he finished, a soft silence filled the room. Then, one of the mothers stood up. She looked at Daniel with kind eyes and said, "Thank you for telling the truth. We know you did not choose this. What matters is how we support each other now." Others nodded. A father stood and added, "Our families are not changing. Our children are the same. This does not take anything away from us." Someone else said they appreciated Daniel's honesty. Slowly, the room filled with supportive voices. The children, who had no idea what the adults were talking about, suddenly ran toward Daniel, pulling on his sleeve, asking if he could fix their toys tomorrow. Their innocent faces made many parents smile with relief. One small girl with curly hair climbed into his lap without hesitation. She didn't care about DNA or reports. She only knew that Daniel was kind. The moment touched the entire room. People saw the truth, not just the science, but the humanity behind the situation. Daniel did not claim to be a father in the traditional sense. He did not ask for anything. He simply wanted peace for everyone. By the end of the gathering, something unexpected had happened. Instead of fear or conflict, the town felt united. The strange truth that could have caused anger instead became a reminder that people could face shocking situations with kindness. And Daniel, who once thought he was just a quiet mechanic, became someone the town respected even more. A man who chose honesty over hiding and calm over panic. But Daniel had no idea that the days ahead would bring new changes, new connections, and a new purpose he never imagined for himself. In the days that followed the town gathering, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The first shock had passed, and people now understood the truth with clearer minds. Instead of avoiding Daniel, many families greeted him with warm nods or small smiles. Some even stopped him in the street, just to say they appreciated how respectfully he had handled everything. Daniel still felt unsure at times, still wondered if he was doing everything right. But the kindness he received made his heart feel lighter. One morning, as he unlocked the door of his workshop, he noticed a small crowd of children already waiting outside. They had bicycles, broken toys, and half-finished school projects in their hands. Before the DNA reports, children had always liked him, but now they seemed even more drawn to him. Some parents stood nearby, watching with gentle eyes. They didn't push their children toward him, but they didn't stop them either. They simply allowed the natural connection to happen. Daniel smiled and opened the workshop door. "All right," he said softly, "one at a time." The children rushed inside, filling the space with chatter and excitement. As he worked, he noticed how some of them shared tiny features with him, similar smiles, similar eyes, similar curls, but he didn't think of them as his children. They already had their parents, their homes, their families. He simply saw them as kids who liked being around him, and he wanted to be someone who made their world a little brighter. Parents treated Daniel with new layers of understanding. Some invited him for tea or dinner, not out of obligation, but out of genuine appreciation. They wanted him to feel welcome, not like an outsider in his own town. One couple even said, "We're glad our son has another good person to look up to. Not another parent, just someone who cares." Their words touched Daniel deeply. But the biggest change came when a group of parents asked if he would consider starting weekly workshops for children. They said the kids loved fixing things with him so much that they wanted a place where they could learn together. Daniel felt surprised but pleased. He had always enjoyed teaching simple repairs, showing kids how things worked, and helping them build confidence. The idea of doing it in an organized way felt meaningful. So he agreed. On the first Saturday of the workshop, Daniel arrived early and set up small stations, one for bicycles, one for wooden projects, one for simple mechanical parts, and a corner for toys. He didn't expect many children, maybe 5 or 6. But by the time he opened the door, more than 20 kids stood waiting, holding their tools proudly. Parents stood behind them, smiling with quiet encouragement. Daniel laughed softly. "I wasn't ready for this many," he said, but his warm tone made everyone relax. He welcomed them inside and began guiding them through small projects. Some kids hammered pieces of wood together. Others fixed squeaky wheels. A few learned how to take apart and rebuild simple machines. Daniel moved from one child to another, answering questions, guiding hands, and cheering them on when they succeeded. The workshop became a safe, happy place. The children loved it. The parents loved seeing their kids learn new skills. And Daniel felt like he was doing something that mattered, not because of the DNA connection, but because he enjoyed helping the next generation grow confident and capable. As weeks passed, the workshop grew. Some families brought snacks. Some brought extra tools. The community center even offered to donate a larger space, so Daniel wouldn't have to pack everything into his workshop. People supported him not out of pressure, but out of respect for the kind of man he had always been. One afternoon, after finishing a long workshop, Daniel sat outside on a bench near his garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. He felt tired but peaceful. He looked at the simple house he had lived in for years, the quiet streets he knew so well, and the small town that had become even closer to him in recent months. He never imagined his life would take such an unexpected turn. He never imagined that a forgotten decision from his youth would connect him to so many families. And he never imagined that instead of breaking the town apart, it would bring them together. Still, Daniel sometimes wondered about his role. He was not trying to be a father. He didn't want to cross any boundaries or step into places where he didn't belong. But he also understood that his presence meant something to many children. Not because of DNA, but because he showed them kindness, patience, and encouragement. He realized he didn't have to be a traditional parent to make a positive difference in their lives. He just had to be himself. One evening, a father visited him with his young daughter, a quiet girl who loved making small wooden figures. The father thanked Daniel for teaching her how to use tools safely. "She trusts you," the father said. "Not because of anything scientific. She just feels comfortable around you." His words were sincere, and Daniel felt grateful for them. Another day, an elderly grandmother from town stopped by with a basket of fresh bread. She placed it in his hands and said, "You handled everything with grace, son. You showed courage when others might have panicked." Daniel felt emotion rise in his chest. He didn't feel like a hero. He simply felt like a man who did what he believed was right. As months passed, the town fully embraced the new normal. Families who had once felt confused now talked openly. Many parents told their children in gentle ways about the DNA connection, explaining that biology was just one small piece of life. The children listened, curious, but not scared. Kids rarely complicate things if someone cares about them. They accept it with simple hearts. Some children began calling Daniel Uncle Daniel, a name that felt friendly and respectful. It didn't suggest a parent-child relationship. It simply meant someone they trusted. Daniel liked it. It felt right. He continued living his simple life, repairing machines, tending to his garden, teaching workshops, and helping the community whenever he could. People didn't treat him strangely. They didn't make him feel different. Instead, they treated him as someone important, not because of the DNA discovery, but because of who he was every day. One late evening, Daniel sat on his porch with a cup of warm tea. He watched the children running home after a long day of play. Some waved at him. He waved back with a soft smile. In that peaceful moment, he realized something surprising. Though he never planned for it, he had become part of many lives in a meaningful way. Not as a father who raised them, but as a steady presence they could rely on. He understood now that life sometimes brought unexpected truths, but people could choose how to respond. The town chose unity. The families chose understanding. And Daniel chose kindness, responsibility, and honesty. What could have been a story of anger and confusion became a story of acceptance and connection. He took a deep breath, feeling a quiet peace settle in his heart. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew he would face it with the same calm strength he carried through everything. And no matter what people said or how unusual the situation seemed, he was proud of one simple truth. He had become someone who helped shape the lives of many children, not because of biology alone, but because he showed them care, patience, and respect. And in that quiet town, under the warm evening sky, Daniel finally understood that sometimes family is not only about blood. Sometimes it is about the kindness shared, the trust built, and the small moments that bring people together. And in that way, he had become a part of something beautiful, something far greater than he ever expected.